So on this week's podcast and Reiki Share, we're talking about the power of a Reiki grid. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the world peace grids and how you can all get involved with that. If you don't already have a Reiki grid, I really encourage you to create one. And if you already have one, there might be a few ideas here tonight, or it might be time to update your grid. And afterwards, we'll go into a meditation where we're all going to work together to empower each other's Reiki grids, and then also to send Reiki toward the energy of world peace. And I think the world could really use that right now. Before we go too far, though, for those who are thinking about either starting a Reiki business or bringing Reiki into what you already do, I'll put a link in the podcast to the Reiki Business Book. And I'm also going to put a link in the podcast to my article, The Power of a Reiki Grid, so that anybody who wants to can check that out and just get a few additional ideas or that sort of thing. We'll be covering some of the highlights, but you might want to look a little deeper into this idea of a Reiki grid. And I'm also going to put a link to the World Peace Grids if anybody wants to become a member and begin doing that. And I'll tell you a little bit about the World Peace Grids and the history of them tonight as well. So yeah, I just wanted to give you a little bit of information about the way that you can do a personal Reiki grid first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the World Peace Grids after that. When I first learned Reiki and learned the distance symbol at level 2, I remember thinking, oh my goodness, there's so many things that I need to send Reiki to. How am I ever going to, I'm never going to have time to do anything else but just sit and send Reiki to people and goals that I wanted to empower and things like that. And so I did quite a bit of research, and I finally came onto this concept of a Reiki grid. And in the ICRT, this is something we teach at the master level, but it's actually something that in my own classes I decided to start teaching at level 2 once my students had the distance symbol. And the reason is that I've seen other students in my classes get overwhelmed by when they realize how many things could benefit from Reiki. I've seen people get overwhelmed by thinking, how do I get Reiki to this many things? And the Reiki grid is a really efficient and effective way to do that. And in fact, I remember in one class, I like to review Reiki classes a lot. You learn a lot from doing that. And in one class that I reviewed, one of the girls actually got really overwhelmed and even broke into tears. And yeah, Kat's saying you could literally spend 24 hours a day sending Reiki to everything. You really could. And this girl became into tears for that exact reason, Kat. She said, oh my gosh, everything in my life, everyone in my life needs Reiki. How do I do that? And so that's really what I wanted to come here to talk with you about today. If you have the distance symbol, if you have level 2 Reiki, you really have one of the biggest things that does, aside from giving empaths a way to clear excess emotions that we might be holding on to. The other really neat thing with level 2 Reiki is it gives us a distance symbol, and it gives us a way to send Reiki to several things at the same time and the distance symbol, we consider it a bridge of light. It's a bridge to whatever you need to send to, and it also acts as a homing device. So even if you don't know exactly, for instance, where a person is that you're trying to send Reiki to, the energy can find them through the distance symbol. It's a homing device. Or even if you don't know who you're sending to, and I'll expand a little bit more on that. You might be wondering about that, but I actually send Reiki to people that I don't know, and I simply trust the distance symbol to get it to them. So my research showed that we could do a Reiki grid, and this was before I learned at the master level where they taught about Reiki grids. And I just decided to begin teaching that at level 2. And a Reiki grid is simply something that we can put together so that we can efficiently and effectively send Reiki to several things at the same time. And the only trouble with a Reiki grid is that you tend to manifest things so quickly and efficiently that you do have to update them frequently because you've already accomplished the goals that you intend to send to, or whatever have you. So just to give you a few ideas of some of the things that you could include in your own Reiki grid, and I'd really love you to just jot down, and if you don't already have a grid, even as I'm speaking, if you think of some names or people or animals or situations or goals that you want to send Reiki to, go ahead and jot them down, because this doesn't have to be formal. For years, my Reiki grid was a stack of recipe cards or index cards, and it just had one stack was for all the people one card was all the people that I was sending to, just listing their names. Another card was all the animals that I was sending to, listing their names. And if you write very small, you can fit a lot of animals and a lot of people on an index card. Another card was goals that I had, personal goals for myself, my health, that sort of thing. Another card was goals that I had for my business, actually, and in my professional life. Another card was goals that I had for the earth and for humanity and for the people of the earth. And so you can basically go ahead and send Reiki to all of these things. Now, one of the things I mentioned is I didn't even always know who I was sending Reiki to. And that's because there's this thing that happens when people sign up for a Reiki class. Often they begin to heal, and we call it shifting. Their vibration shifts. They start letting go of the things that are dragging them down to get ready to shift to a higher vibration. But a lot of people find that shifting very uncomfortable. And one of the things that one of my former teachers told me is that she never knew who was going to show up for her classes, because that shifting process would often cause people to get a little unnerved and maybe not go ahead with their Reiki class or cancel at the last minute or that sort of thing. And so I thought about that for a moment. I thought, I could send them Reiki so that it's not so difficult for them, so that maybe the shifting is a little gentler and it doesn't frighten them as much, and just makes it easier for them to get to class, because I knew that they were meant to be in class and that they would benefit from it, and it's just whether they would be uncomfortable and decide not to come. And so at first, when I taught, that would happen. I would have people maybe have anxiety attacks on the day of class, or get a little flustered as they were shifting. And then I began sending Reiki to them. And so I actually have a line. I send Reiki to my students, past, present, and future. And if you've ever taken a Reiki class from me, I have your name on a list, and I send Reiki to you unless you tell me you don't want it. So quite a few of you are already getting some Reiki every day, or I have to admit, it's been a little busy lately. I'm probably only charging my grid 3 or 4 times a week. So you may not get it every day from me, but you do get it quite a few days of the week. And Lisa said, thank you. You're welcome, Lisa. But by sending past, present, and future, I might not even know who my students are going to be, but the Reiki energy can line them up so that they're with the exact right group of people that they are meant to learn with. And you'll see that happen in my classes, that people will have a lot in common, and the comments that one person makes or the experiences that they have really helps another person, and that camaraderie and so on that establishes. And so I really believe it's because I send Reiki to these students, past, present, and future. And I don't know who they are, but I know that homing device on the distance symbol knows who is going to study here, and it gets it to them. And basically, there are several ways to create a Reiki grid, but I'm just going to talk to you about a really simple one today, and one that I used for a long time. And of course, if you have studied at the master level, there's a little more complex grid that we give you. But for today, I just want to share a simple one that anybody can do, and that if you don't have a Reiki grid, that you please go ahead and start one. So the first thing is just to write that list. And it doesn't have to be a list as well. You can also put photos in your Reiki grid. So I have a photo of my 3 children, for instance, that I keep in. It's one of my favorite pictures in one of our favorite places. And I keep that in my Reiki grid. And your Reiki grid doesn't have to be massive. I actually have a little travel grid because I was traveling so much. Mine actually fits in a greeting card envelope, size envelope. And I actually had gone and taken one of the cards of the World Peace Grid and just glued some tiny, it's just a small 5x7, it's the size of an index card, and I just glued some tiny crystals on it, and I actually include that in my grid. You don't need to do that though. That's just something that I like to do. The main thing is to just simply write down all of the people, places, clients, goals, and that sort of thing that you'd like to send Reiki to. And as a matter of fact, my grid is one of the reasons maybe we're talking about this tonight, is my grid needs updating. I last updated it in March, and I noticed that so much happens once you start sending Reiki to it regularly through your Reiki grid. You accomplish so many goals that I do have to go through it really regularly and update it. For instance, in March, we were still looking for just a small property on the ocean to put a cabin, and that's already, we actually wound up getting much more than that, and that's already happened. So I'll need, and much more than I could have imagined. So I'll need to go in and update that and a few other things. And so I actually wound up typing my grid up eventually. And the only reason I did that is I was getting such a thick stack of index cards, and I had to redo them all the time. And so typing them was just a little easier to edit. And so I actually eventually typed them all up, and I also typed up the list of my students. But once you have the things that you want to send Reiki to written, and it can be handwritten, it can be index cards, it can be typed, it can be as simple or as fancy as you want, I just fold up my sheet so it's roughly the size of index cards, and it fits in my hands. And then you can actually send Reiki to all of the things in your grid in just about 5 to 10 minutes a day. So I actually hold this envelope that has all of my papers and photos in it. I just hold it in my hands each day, and I actually have the symbols drawn on them, but if I didn't, I could just draw over top of them all of my symbols. And then I simply hold them in my hands, activate my Reiki energy, and I say this little prayer. And this is written in the article if you don't get it down and would like to get the wording. And you say a prayer that works for you, but this one works for me. I say, please send Reiki, holy fire, love and light to the situations and souls in my Reiki grid. Please continue sending it for 24 hours or until such time as I can charge my grid again. And because I've used the distance symbol, I can feel the energy flowing from my hands right now. I'm holding my grid in my hands and I can feel the energy flowing. And I just stay there for 5 minutes or so. And sometimes I read through the list to remember what I'm sending to, and sometimes I don't. And you can also, it's also a really good idea to put yourself in the grid so that you can be receiving continuous Reiki as well. It never hurts to receive from many sources, and when I look at what that does, it almost appears to layer the energy around people when you're receiving from different places at once. And after I've held the grid for, I don't know, 5 minutes or so, sometimes it's a little longer, just depending. It almost feels like I'm in the Gasho meditation when I do this, so it feels so good. And then I'll set my grid down, and I actually pick up a favorite crystal. And I also draw the distance symbol over the crystal, and I hold the crystal in my hands and activate my Reiki energy. And I ask the crystal, and I usually dowse first or use muscle testing just to make sure that this crystal wants to be part of my Reiki grid, because it's quite a job. The energy is being sent continuously. So if you're a person like me that really has a liking for stones and can hear them or wants to consider their wants and needs, it's a good idea just to check. But when you do have a crystal that feels like it would like to help you, you just can hold that special crystal in your hands for, usually it's about another 5 minutes or so, until it feels really charged. And I just say the following prayer with that. Please help the Reiki holy fire, love and light get to the situations and souls in my Reiki grid for the next 24 hours or until such time as I can charge you again. And so I would hold that until it really feels, you can feel the heat coming from your hands into the stone. And I hold that until it feels really warm and it feels fully charged. And once it feels fully charged, I simply set these in a special place on my desk together and know that for the next 24 hours they are charged, and that Reiki is going to the people and the goals and the situations and the things that I care about. Anytime there's natural disasters or wars or really difficult things happening on the earth, I include those in my Reiki grid. And there's something about knowing. I call Reiki my superpower, because you're never helpless. There's always something you can do. You can always send Reiki, and especially through the Reiki grid. That's a really effective way to send it. Now, one thing to bear in mind when you are sending to natural disasters or people that are struggling, sympathy can get in the way. All right, it can. And what I'm thinking of, actually, Mary, this was a message that both Colleen and I got quite strongly during the fires that were happening in Australia, and we were sending to the koalas and the animals that were being displaced. And the animals actually communicated with us and said, thank you for sending it without sympathy, because sympathy is a lot for us to carry. It's a burden for us to carry. We appreciate that you're just sending the pure energy without your heavy feelings about it. And they just showed us that if we feel heavy about a situation, and the importance of asking your personal energy and ego to step aside so that you're not passing along any heavy feelings or things like that when you do send distance energy, that you're only sending the pure Reiki energy and the pure love. And so when you do that, the other thing that I sometimes people ask me about a Reiki grid is, what about, can I include my brother because he doesn't really like Reiki, and I don't know if he would really want it? And the answer is yes, because if they wouldn't want it, Reiki is divinely guided life force energy. It will never go against anyone's free will. And so you can go ahead and include them in your Reiki grid. And if they really don't want it, they will not receive it. But it feels really odd. There's a few people in my life that I love who are not really interested in receiving Reiki, some of my family members, but it would seem so odd to include some family members and not others. I love them all equally, and so I include them all, knowing that some of them probably aren't receiving it. But you know what? It doesn't take me any longer to send it than it takes the same length of time, whether they're included or not. And I have the comfort of knowing that if they ever change their mind, it's hovering around them somewhere, that they could tap into it. So you don't really, sending Reiki in a Reiki grid is not something you really have to get too hung up on permissions. For instance, even if you were sending, typically, if you were sending to a neighbor's animal, you would ask. But if that wasn't possible for some reason, it wasn't possible to ask, then you could go ahead and send it knowing that if the neighbor or the animal didn't want the energy, it wouldn't go to them. So we don't have to get too hung up on permissions. You can actually feel free to include anyone and anything in your grid, knowing that the Reiki energy will never go against anybody's wishes. So if they didn't want to be included, they wouldn't be. I spoke with William Rand about that at one point and about permissions, and he said it's really not that different from praying for somebody. It's pretty much the same thing. And lots of people pray for other people and don't really spend a lot of time asking for permission to do that. Oh, thank you, Kat. And so anyway, that's where we go with that. So does anybody have any questions about Reiki grids tonight before I talk a little bit about the World Peace Grids and what they're all about?
Sorry, I didn't mean to send that. I was just getting it queued up and it sent it. Yeah, I was just going to ask for input on that because the way I do it is quite different.
Yeah.
And I obviously want to do it. I know there's probably lots of different ways you can approach it, but I used the animal Reiki grid for mine.
Yeah.
And it's the size of an 8x11 piece of paper. I had it laminated and I glued on these crystals, and each of those crystals in the wand were all selected specifically for this grid. So I have a friend who runs a crystal shop, and I was in there, and it took me a good hour to just go through and get the right crystals and the ones that spoke to me. And I actually use the wand following William Lee Rand's instructions. I actually go around with the wand as part of mine. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
So that's actually what I do now too. And so what you're asking is about the grid that you use in a different method. And if you are at the master level, you're going to have learned, at least if you studied with, I know at the ICRT curriculum, we teach a way to do a Reiki grid. And it's a little more complicated than what I've described. And I thought it was a little too complicated to explain in a podcast. But if you're at the master level and you use that, that's excellent. That's actually what I use now. But for years I used this simple method, and so I teach the simple method for at level 1 and 2. And I was thinking some of the people listening to the podcast that there will probably be more level 1 and 2 people as well. And then if you decide to study animal Reiki, again with the ICRT system, we did create another, just a beautiful grid with the Tree of Life. And Robin and Sue did a lot of work on that. It's beautiful what they came up with. And yeah, the way that you're doing it is exactly right, Kat. It's just a little more complicated than a lot of people are going to be listening to this and not watching it. So it's a little more complicated than I felt.
Makes sense. And for traveling too, the other, having them to take with you when you're on the move. I can't really travel with my grid, so
Right.
the one that you described, I think, would work really well with that.
It does. And another thing, though, if you have even one of the more complex, beautiful master grids or animal Reiki grids, for traveling, you can just take with you a photo of it or even have a photo on your phone, and you can still charge it the same way that you normally do. And even with my little grid, I could have taken a photo, but there's something for me, I actually just I have my grid done up so I can tuck it into my journal, which goes everywhere with me. And the first thing I did, I was traveling a lot to teach, and the first thing I would do is every new place I would pull out my grid and I would set it up beside me, and then pull out my little crystal I have a smaller travel crystal. And pull out my crystal to set it on top, and just knowing that I had the grid and my crystal charging on my bedside table no matter where I went. I don't know, it just made me feel really secure and at home. And so have grid will travel. I think it works really well. Mary's probably seen it when I stay at her house on my little bedside table. It's the first thing I do is pull out my grid, get the Reiki flowing as soon as I arrive somewhere. And it's just flowing right there beside me wherever I stay. I love that. Any other questions, you guys? Okay. I'd like to tell you a little bit about the World Peace Grids before we move into our meditation tonight. And the World Peace Grids are a concept that William Rand came up with back quite some time ago. Actually, my brain's a little fuzzy tonight for some reason, so I'm not thinking about dates very well. But I believe it was in '96 that he took a World Peace Grid. I'll just quickly have a look at my book, my manual, so that I get that accurately for you. But he was guided to create these World Peace Grids and take them to the North and South Poles. He was guided to create 6 in total. And the World Peace Grids are something that I always include in my own crystal grid because I don't know, I can't always join the monthly Reiki share for world peace, so I just send to them every day and every time that I send Reiki. So he actually got the idea to do this in 1997, and he created these beautiful copper. No worries, Denise. I hope everything's okay. Thank you. He created these beautiful copper plates that were a little bigger than the size of my head, actually. They're fairly large. And they are gold plated, And they're in the shape of the 12-petaled lotus flower, which is also the shape of the ICRT logo. And they have at each petal a symbol and the name of the 12 major world religions. And these include native peoples, Buddhism, Hinduism, independent spiritual paths, Christianity, Judaism, the goddess religions, Islam, Shintoism, Zoroastrianism, Taoism, and all others, including agnostics and atheists. And in addition to that, there are crystals, double terminated quartz crystals that are attached at each petal and in front of each symbol of the world religions. And in the center, there's a master crystal, and under that master crystal are the Reiki symbols. And they're kept private that way because they're under the master symbol. And the following words are written in a circle around the central crystal. May the followers of all religions and spiritual paths work together to create peace among all people on earth. So William actually, in May of 1997, placed the first World Peace Grid at the North Pole, and he actually placed it at the magnetic North Pole. It took days because once he got to the North Pole, there were storms and they couldn't always travel. And at one point, he wound up going with a ski and dog sled team that were going to the North Pole. There were a few extra seats on the plane, and he had to wait for the right weather conditions. They went to the Eureka weather station on Ellesmere Island and had to refuel, but the weather again got pretty crazy. And he discovered, though, that there were actually two North Poles. There's a geographic North Pole and a magnetic North Pole. Now, William had chosen the geographic North Pole because he was offered a ride there. He didn't realize that it was possible to get to the magnetic North Pole, even though he was considering the reason he wanted to put the Reiki grids at the North and South Poles is he felt that the magnetic pull of the magnetism of the Earth would take the wishes for world peace all around the entire planet. Now, the flight dispatcher, when he understood what William was doing, became sympathetic to his cause and wound up getting him a flight to the actual magnetic North Pole near Elif Rings Island. And when he landed there, he went away from the sea ice. He dedicated the World Peace Crystal Grid, gave it its final charge of Reiki, and took a picture of it so that we could all send Reiki energy to that actual Reiki grid that he placed there. And then he buried it in the snow. He knew that when the sea ice melted in July, that the grid was going to sink to the bottom of the Arctic Ocean and remain there forever. So one of the World Peace Grids was placed there in 97. Now, it took William a few more years. In December of 1999, he went to the southern tip of Chile, and then, which was his first stop on the way to the South Pole, to place the second grid. Once again, he had to wait until the weather cleared, and after 4 days, they were able to take off and were able to go to Patriot Hills in Antarctica. So he went there and he was assigned a solar heated tent because the outside temperature was minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. But the sun is up all the time, so therefore the solar energy was able to charge and keep the tents warmer, much warmer. They had special clothing and sleeping bags, and mostly he was able to stay fairly warm. They had snow melters for drinking water. And I guess it was just really incredible. There were pilots, world-class skiers, mountain climbers, and explorers, and they would all sit around telling stories. They couldn't really spend much time outdoors. It took 4 more days for the weather to clear once they were there before they could actually leave for the South Pole. And they had a 3-hour escorted tour of the pole and the scientific station there, and then we're going to have to leave. So because that wasn't really a lot of time for what William wanted to do, but once again, after they got to the South Pole and were taken on the tour and got back in the plane, the weather at Patriot Hills had got bad, so they had to stay at Pole until the conditions improved. And there was no room at the science station, so they were able to stay in their tents there. It took 5 days there before the weather cleared at Patriot Hills and they could leave, and that gave William enough time to find the right spot for the World Peace Grid in order to place it. And while he was there, some of the people were struggling with the cold and struggling with being stranded. So he wound up teaching a mini Reiki class with a couple of the women that were there, a couple of female students. It was their first camping experience, and the minus 60-degree Fahrenheit wind chill was a little much for them. And they were also at an altitude of 10,000 feet, so that helped with their comfort level and cheered them up a little bit. At first, he gave them Reiki sessions, then he brought them hot water, and then finally he suggested that he could teach them Reiki, and they took him up on it. So he's probably one of the only Reiki masters to have taught Reiki at the South Pole, I would expect, which was cool. He found the energy in Antarctica, and especially at the South Pole, absolutely phenomenal. And there were a lot of things that happened on his way there. He was explaining to us, even though it's not in the story, in the master manual, he was explaining to us that there was one city in South America that he had to travel through where there were crystals everywhere. Like the gravel under your feet was crystals, because there were just so many crystals in this place. And so even though it took a lot longer and was probably quite trying, he had a wonderful time. He gave a Reiki talk when they returned to Patriot Hills. He just during his 5-day stay there, he said the meditations he had were amazing. He was able to sit on the exact South Pole with the Peace Grid and at the same time tune into the one on the North Pole and really connect the two. And he could experience the huge ball of earth between the poles and feel the energy as he sent Reiki and prayed for peace on earth. He was able to do that quite a few times. And then eventually, after several days of this and meditation and taking the photo, he did a special ritual and buried the Peace Grid at the South Pole just the day before they left. It's going to remain there, and the ice isn't going to melt, of course, at the South Pole, but the snow will bury it continually deeper because as each year's snowfall accumulates. And so it is buried right there at the South Pole. Now, William also was then guided in 2003 to travel to Israel to teach Reiki, and he began thinking about the importance of placing a World Peace Grid there. He went to several places, and each place that he went, he would ask the energy of the place if it was appropriate or if world peace was wanted. And actually, he was quite surprised, but a lot of places were not really looking for peace or not really open to peace. And he thought about maybe it should go at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee or the Dead Sea or buried in the desert, but none of the places felt quite right. He did want to place a grid there, though, because Jerusalem is a place of unrest, and yet it is also the birthplace of three of the larger world religions. It is very important for Judaism, Christianity, and the Muslim tradition or Islam. So he continued moving around, and then he wound up speaking with the gentleman who was hosting the Reiki class there. And it turns out the place that they were hosting it at was an old oil press, like an olive oil press where they used to make olive oil. And they had purchased the building. It was a 1,500-year-old building, and they changed it into an art gallery. So it's actually called the Oil Press Art Gallery. And pardon me, it wasn't olive oil, it was sesame oil that was made at this art gallery. That was previously made, and these giant stones were turned by a camel and made the sesame oil. So what happened was that the owner, when they became an art gallery, had started to create a hole in the wall for a safe by chipping at the soft stone with a hammer. But he came to very hard stone, and he knew he'd discovered something important. So they brought in the archaeologists, who told them that they had uncovered part of the original 3,000-year-old wall of the city that surrounded Solomon's temple. And so Solomon's temple was a very important temple for Judaism and for afterward for Christianity and for Islam. And so they decided not to put the safe there, but now they had this little opening that touched on this 3,000-year-old wall, and they invited William to place the World Peace Grid there. So it's actually on the wall of the original that surrounded Solomon's temple 3,000 years ago. In addition to that, William placed one of the World Peace Grids at the ICRT Reiki Center in Michigan. He also placed another one at the ICRT Center, which is also his home in Hawaii, in Hana, Hawaii. And I've been very fortunate to have been able to meditate with the actual World Peace Grid as I visited William in Hawaii, which was really special. My friend Joan even polished it while we were there and cleaned it all up, and it just looks so lovely. And finally, the last World Peace Grid was placed just a few years ago on Mount Kurama. And it's an interesting story. Lena Takahashi, who is William's interpreter and friend and a Reiki master teacher in Japan, he left the Peace Grid with her and asked her to make arrangements to take it to the mountain. And there are a couple of shrines on the mountain, so she went to the monks at one of the temples, and she asked them for permission and if they would consider placing the World Peace Grid where they felt it was best served. And what was really interesting is that her first meeting had to be canceled because of weather, because of a typhoon that had come through. And so she had to wait several weeks, and then her second meeting, the monks smiled and said, "Isn't that interesting? Week we are all gathered together, and there were monks from other places that had come because we are meditating this week for world peace." And in fact, one of the monks that was visiting there, he asked if he might be allowed to be the person to place the grid, because he had dedicated his entire life to meditating for world peace. And so it just all really fell into place beautifully. We don't know exactly where that final, I don't know exactly. I don't know if Lena probably does or if William does, but it was placed on Mount Kurama, the birthplace of Reiki, and that just happened a few years ago. So the World Peace Grids are complete now. And if that is something, if you have Reiki from any lineage, it doesn't matter, you don't have to follow the ICRT, but if you have Reiki, and especially if you have the distance symbol that you get at level 2, I'm going to put a link in this podcast, and you can click on that link and you can print out a copy of the World Peace Grids that are a photo of each of them and a description that are placed around the world. And then you can sign up to receive a reminder. And once a month, we get together and send Reiki for world peace. Now, this month, the World Peace Meditation will be Wednesday, August 17th. But you can also tap in and send Reiki at any time that you wish. And there's no charge for this or anything. This is just a way that we can all contribute to world peace. And the World Peace Grids are something that we can use for that. Now, I didn't even realize the tie-in until I started telling you guys this story. The podcasts that I've been doing of late are around a book that I started, and I don't know if I will get a chance to finish or not, but I do think that there are a lot of people interested. At some point, I will write the book, and it was something that I was shown back in 2017, that it doesn't really matter what religious or spiritual tradition that you're from. What every single person on earth is seeking is a more profound connection with God or with Source or whatever name that they use. And in fact, at the core of our being, every single human being on earth is love and is looking for that divine connection with each other, with God, whatever name you use, and with ourselves. So I actually started a podcast series on Reiki and the religions of the World Peace Grid. And while I have had an opportunity to talk to quite a few people, I'm still actually looking for people from that practice Hinduism and Reiki, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, Shintoism, independent spiritual paths such as scientists, people who are scientific, and I'm also looking for agnostics and atheists who practice Reiki. So if any of you listening, if this is your background and you would be interested in being interviewed for this series, please let me know. I'd really love to include you if I could. So that was really interesting with the tie-in. Did anyone have any questions at all about the World Peace Grids? All right. From here then, I'm just going to invite you to move into a meditation with me, if you would. So I'm just going to ask you to make yourselves comfortable, to close your eyes, and just bring your hands into Gasho, with your thumbs at your heart, your palms together, just activating your Reiki energy. And we'll begin with the original Reiki ideals just for today. I will not be angry. I will not worry. I will be devoted to my work. I will be kind to all others, and I will be filled with gratitude. And if you have Reiki symbols, I invite you to invoke those now. In whatever way that you choose, you may speak their names or draw them or imagine them. And just bringing all of your Reiki symbols from the highest heavens through your hands and into your heart. And in the room around you, surrounding you. And if you have a Reiki grid, I invite you to place that in your hands now. And if you don't, just imagine the people, the animals, the situations, the goals, the things that you would like to send Reiki to now. Just imagine those between your palms, just receiving Reiki energy, using the distance symbol to ensure that it gets to them. And you may say, I charge this grid with light to heal. I charge this grid with love to heal. I charge this grid with Reiki to heal. And now just imagine each of your Reiki symbols flowing into your Reiki grid. And don't forget to include yourself in your grid. And just breathe in the Reiki energy that is all around you today. And just noticing yourself relaxing into and with the energy. And if you do happen to have a crystal with you, you can charge that now, and if you don't, you can charge that later. If you don't, you can simply place your hands comfortably on your body. And you may wish to keep the Reiki, your Reiki grid, or the intentions for whom you're sending the energy to in your hands as well. And we're just going to breathe here for several breaths, just ensuring that the Reiki energy flows through to your grid, and at the same time, just imagining that we're all linking together today, and we're all sending Reiki to each other's grids as well at the same time. And so that you're sending to my intentions, situations and souls, and I am sending to yours. And you may consider a phrase, something like this: I send Reiki, love, and light to the situations and souls in my grid. And I include myself. And you may even consider the phrase that many of us use for guidance. Asking the Reiki energy to guide us and heal us so that we may be of greater service to ourselves and to others. And now I invite you to imagine that it's a beautiful, warm, sunny day. And that you're taking a flight. And you have your Reiki grid with you. And we're flying today first to the North Pole. When we get there, we may have to bundle up and get a dog sled team. I'd like you to imagine that we go to the spot on the North Pole that has the Reiki grid, the World Peace Grid. And just imagine lying your own Reiki grid, whatever it looks like, whatever form it's in, over top of the World Peace Grid today. And we all sit in a circle with our grids surrounding the World Peace Grid. And from our hands we beam energy, beaming energy into our grids and each other's. Beaming energy to that original World Peace Grid, connecting our own Reiki grids to it. And in addition to the things that we are considering in our grid, we send to the people from every world religion, every major world religion, from every country. And we say, may the followers of all the world's religions work together to create peace among all people on earth. And we're going to stay here for a while and just connecting with each other and with the energy of the World Peace Grid at the North Pole. the earth at the North Pole invites you that if there is anything that is not peaceful within you, any illness or disease or feelings of anger or frustration or sadness or anything at all, any conflict that exists and within any relationships, anything that is not peaceful within you, she invites you to just leave it there with her, where she will transmute the energy into a force for the good. And at the same time, just imagine that your energy is pulling in close to your body. And as it does, any energy you may be holding that is not yours, any energy you may be holding on behalf of others, any of their expectations or projections on you, they just fall away and they fall into the thirsty earth, where they are absorbed and transmuted. And we'll just breathe in this place of sovereignty for a while. Now I invite you to imagine that the Ascended Masters, the angels, and the brothers and sisters of the light swoop down and pick us all up with our Reiki grids and bring us to the South Pole, where they have uncovered the Reiki grid there. Once again, we sit in a circle with our Reiki grids placed next to the World Peace Grid at the South Pole, and we connect with it. And just noticing the very different feeling at the South Pole. And looking within us to discover, are there any belief systems, any beliefs maybe that we have about ourselves that we're not good enough, or any stories that we tell ourselves about who we are that we have outgrown, that are no longer serving us, that are holding us back? Are there any limitations we may have placed upon ourselves, knowingly or unknowingly, or that may have been placed there by others' expectations or so on? If there is anything that is limiting us from accomplishing our purpose on earth, the earth at the South Pole just asks you to leave that with her. And so just feeling that flowing out of our bodies, connected with each other, connected with our grids, connected with the World Peace Grid at the South Pole, we release any limiting beliefs, any of the stories that are holding us back, any limitations that exist at all toward accomplishing our life purpose and anchoring love onto the earth. And we'll breathe here for a while. Now those same angels and enlightened ones and brothers and sisters of the light gather us and our grids, whether they're in form yet or still in imagination. They gather us and they transport us to the World Peace Grid in Jerusalem. And this time we're sitting in an ark facing the wall, the original wall of the Temple of Solomon. And you can feel yourself connecting with the history of that place. And there must be a very special energy if it is the birthplace of 3 of the world major religions. And yet, as it is such a place of conflict, we place our grids and we connect with this World Peace Grid and we say, may the followers of all the world's religions and spiritual paths work together to create peace among all people on earth. And this time, from a place of clarity within, we send blessings. We send blessings and peace from our hearts into the conflict in this region, and to the conflict, all conflicts that exist on the earth. The conflict in the Ukraine and in the 21 other wars that are happening, and even the potential conflict that we're told may exist with China and Taiwan, with North Korea. And we send Reiki to all conflict that exists on the earth. And as we do, you feel an energy reaching out from your heart, and it reaches out and it connects with the World Peace Grid in Michigan and the one in Hawaii. And you can feel the backing of the 100,000 people who are formally connected with the ICRT, and the additional people who are informally connected. You can feel the 40 to 50,000 people that send energy for world peace each month. And from Michigan and Hawaii, our hearts reach out even further to Japan, and this forms a beautiful triangle around the earth. And then it comes from Japan and returns to you. This diamond shape in Japan, and it returns to you concentrated to the back of your heart chakra, where you receive the blessings of world peace and of personal peace yourself. And we'll remain here for a while. And the energy of the earth and the energy of Reiki begins to fill you. The divine light of the earth and the divine light from the heart of God, whatever name you use. And you feel connected to the earth, to yourself, to each other, to the divine, to peace. And you can feel the connection with all of the world peace grids and the connection to your own dear Reiki grid. And you know that your grid has been charged, the intentions that you have, the people, places, the situations and souls the understanding that everything is going to be okay. We are all one and all is right with the world. Ahoma Takweo Asan and Namaste. I invite you to stay here as long as you'd like, and whenever you feel ready, you can return. Thank you for joining us today.